right, thank you. Again, appreciate everybody coming out tonight. I had warned Bailey that this might be a small crowd just due to the fact that we were originally planning for just an online meeting. And she was more than happy to accommodate us by switching to a live meeting as well. So many more people will be able to see it online as well. But concerning some future meetings, next month, July 13th, will be entitled Behind the Scenes Women in Science, which is presented by Lynette Reiner, who is the Science Director at McKinley Presidential Library and Museum. And she'll be discussing some amazing accomplishments by women in the field of science. Most of these individuals who you probably don't know the names of, but we will by the end of that program. August, which is our picnic, which we'll be having at the Pavilion 1 at Centennial Park. And our guest speaker for that picnic will be Tom Butch, who's the board chairman, and he'll be just discussing Columbiana County parks, a little bit of the history, where they came from, and where they'd like to go, and what's new there. And even more so in the future, just to kind of give you the heads up, October 12th, I find it is going to be very interesting as well, a Diabolical Witchcraft in Early Modern Europe, which will be presented by Lindsay Starkey, who's an associate professor at Kent State University. So we have some interesting programs. September still to be determined, as well as November, December, but I'll give you updates as those arrive as well. But even more important is tonight's program, which is presented by Bailey Yoder, who most of you already are aware that she's from Salem, but ironically I did not when I called her and started talking to her and scheduled her for the meeting tonight. But I'm from Massillon, so that's why my interest was for the program. But a little bit about Bailey. Bailey joined the Massillon Museum staff in April of 2018 as a curator of football heritage for the Paul Brown Museum. She holds a BA in history and adolescent to young adult education from the University of Mount Union, and an MA in history and applied history from Youngstown State University. She oversees research and design and exhibitions in the Paul Brown Gallery and manages the Paul Brown Research Library in memory of Bob Shiring, which houses the extensive Paul Brown and Massillon Tigers archives. Bailey has coordinated and helped design the Paul Brown Museum and created numerous exhibitions, as well as collaborated with outside institutions on multiple projects. She also currently serves as the Region 5 representative for Ohio Local History Alliance, as well as the junior board member for Massillon Tiger Football Booster Club. So at this point, I will go ahead and turn it over to Bailey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for the warm welcome. So I'm Bailey Yoder, and I'm really excited to be here back in my hometown. So I always love coming back to Salem, not just to visit my parents, but to walk around. So I love the blast from the past. Before I get started, I do want to say that there are a couple connections from Massillon to Salem. Earl Bruce coached the football team from 1956 to 1959 here in Salem, and he made his way to Massillon for the 1964-1965 seasons, where he actually was the only coach to have an unbeaten record for Massillon, 20-0. Another fun connection is Salem used to have a professional football team in the early 1900s called the Salem Independents. Not sure how many of you know that. I only know this because of all of the research that I've done on the professional teams in Massillon, and Massillon played Salem a lot, and they always loved coming to Massillon to play the independent team. So those are my fun two little connections back to Salem. All right, so Play Like a Girl is an exhibit that is currently on display in the Paul Brown Museum at Massillon Museum, and I had a lot of fun researching and working on this exhibition, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So women have long been involved in athletic activities, whether leisurely or competitively. Internationally, women were competing in Wimbledon by 1884 and in 5 events in the 1900 Olympics. My favorite sport that I found while researching was called pedestrianism, which I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but it's today's speed walking or race walking. And the first woman to compete in pedestrianism was Emma Sharp, and she was notorious. She was a notorious pedestrian, yes, pedestrian, which is my favorite word ever. now that I know what pedestrianism is. But she actually competed in the 1,000 miles in 1,000 hours Barclay March walk in 1864, which was typically done by men. She wore, instead of your typical skirt, blouse, corset, all those fun bloomers underneath, she actually wore a wool pantsuit, a striped red and white wool pantsuit. And by the end of the race, she had to carry a pistol with her for protection from the men who were trying to get her to stop competing. But she was able to finish the race with an armed guard. Ada Anderson, who also was a pedestrian in the 1800s, was considered the champion lady walker of the world during the second half of the 19th century. She trained with British champion race walker William Gale to beat the Barclay March walk with a record of 1,250 miles in 1,000 half hours. Maybe. There we go. Oops, too fast. Nope, there we go. All right. So, what is the difference between a leisure activity and a competitive sport? Leisure activities promote pleasure, relaxation, and provide emotional satisfaction, and can be an important form of socialization. They can be in the form of hobbies such as cycling, swimming, fishing, croquet, boating, tennis, and golf. Many women in Massillon could readily participate in these activities, but they had to do so recreationally because of societal norms dictating that men could only participate in competitive sports. Competitive sports, on the other hand, are supervised, high-performance activities with the goal of winning titles or prizes. Most are played at the high school, college, and professional levels, and organized into divisions or leagues in which individuals or specific teams are assigned to play each other for tournaments. Women were often excluded from participating in competitive sports like football, basketball, track, soccer, and baseball well into the 20th century. Although women did compete in Wimbledon and the Olympics, they were the minority by far. Women faced discrimination and exclusion from the first Olympics, with French aristocrat Baron Pierre de Coubertin, sorry I'm not French, saying the games were created for, quote, the solemn and periodic exaltation of male athleticism with female applause as reward. I wouldn't like that. A great example of a local women's amateur softball team in Massillon and Canton in the late 40s was the Massillon-Canton Merchants, which you can see pictured here. They were called by local newspapers an unholy alliance because of the great rivalry between the two cities. Historically, it was a rivalry between the steel mills and then the football teams, but it pretty much devolves into literally everything. But they formed a solid team, and in 1949 they defeated teams like the North Canton Hoovers, the Akron K-Styles, the Warren Voima Athletic Club, and they only lost to the Cleveland Metropolitan League champs, the Rangers. Pictured here in the photo is Eleanor Kiley, Eileen Dillon, Marilyn Smith, Mary Jane DeBach, Gloria Fern, Avis Harper, Phil Stuchel, Dolly Bibbich, Elaine Stuchel, Lois Van Orman, Bim Klaus, who was the manager, Barney Klaus, Kay Klaus, Norma Smith, and Jackie Teeple. This team was most likely formed because of the popularity of the National Women's Baseball Association, the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, that gained traction during World War II and continued into the 50s. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Oh no. There it is. There we go. All right. So some of the leisure activities, again, are cycling, swimming, fishing, croquet, boating, tennis, and golf. And they were some of the many activities that women had access to in the late 1800s. Participation in these activities remained a popular pastime among white women of higher social status in Massillon. They were able to form clubs around these activities to include women of all ages, but these clubs or organizations also held a roster of those in high society because they could afford the fees associated with the organizations and also the costumes required for participation. Tennis, for example, required a specific bodice and skirt that allowed freer movement for the ladies to go ahead and bat that ball across the net, while still emphasizing the feminine figure, so they still had to wear a corset. I couldn't. It's too hot for that. The rise in popularity of bloomers, so these are going to be like balloon pants, so similar to what MC Hammer wore in the 80s. These were worn underneath the skirt, and these were created in the 1850s and allowed more freedom for women to play sports like basketball or cycling while still remaining fashionable. Let's see. The bloomers were also, again, worn under the pants and also allowed the woman to remain decent while participating in these activities. And then in this picture here, you can see the women's tennis club from about 1890. These were all students from Massillon High School. They all graduated from about between 1890 and 1894, and believed that they were all pretty much friends with each other, and they all were from higher social class in Massillon. These women were Grace Ryder, Mame Williams, Ellie Yost, Ruth Dangler, Margaret Lula Reed, Helen Nell Williams, Ava Albrecht, May D. White, Clara Burton, and Stella Falk. I swear I'm usually not this bad with a mouse. The opening of the Massillon Athletic Club, which is the top picture here, is the exterior. The bottom picture is the interior, as seen in the Massillon Independent. It opened in 1905 and made access to leisure and other activities available to the working class due to the reduced or free memberships and the rise in popularity of exercise. So a lot more people were able to use this because it was considered more of a community center in the town. Despite this new avenue for broader participation, discrimination and legalized racial segregation during the Jim Crow era prevented people of color from being welcomed into any athletic clubs. However, by the 1920s, societal norms and popular opinion that it was improper for any women to participate in any sport, leisurely or competitive, took over. All right, now my favorite part. When basketball was introduced at Massillon High School in 1901, it was a fairly new sport making strides at Springfield College in Massachusetts. Basketball was created by, and I can't remember his name because I didn't write it down today, but it was created at Springfield College. They used actual peach baskets as the hoops. They didn't cut the bottoms out of it, so they had to have a ladder handy to be able to climb up and grab the ball, so the games were very long and drawn out. They also didn't have high scores with basketball either. It was a lot of running on the court and passing the ball around. Not many baskets were made. So in Massillon, it first gained popularity with the girls, with the class of 1905 formed their own team during their freshman year and scheduled games with the other classes. In their senior year, the junior boys of 1906 finally formed their own team to challenge the girls. They won by a very slim margin, and in the yearbooks were, quote, too afraid to schedule another game because they thought they were going to lose, so the team disbanded. And the boys actually didn't have another team for several years. Of course, at this time, very few boys made it past the 8th grade due to the need to get a job or to help support the family, so there weren't a lot of boys at the high school at this time. But still, I think the girls were doing a pretty good job, and I think they could beat the boys again. By the time the class of 1905, which you can see is on the left side here, graduated, there were junior, senior, and sophomore teams with nearly 30 girls participating. The senior class, which it's hard to see in this picture, and I apologize, but that is the 1905 basketball uniform. It is a denim cotton uniform that we have in the collection. It is a long skirt with your bloomers underneath. You're going to have your midi blouse, and you're also going to wear a dickie underneath. So wearing 4 pieces of denim playing basketball. I would not want to do that either. So the senior class was Sadie Nelson, Alma Deagle, Minnie Eberly, Elizabeth Eulendorf, Gwendolyn Parker, Bessie Spooler, who's that uniform belonged to, Elmira Buttermore, Verma Skeels, Faye Arthur, and Lucille Schrock. So these 10 women kind of really spearheaded the girls' basketball program in Massillon. The picture on the right is the girls' class of 1906 basketball team. Over the next decade, girls basketball remained a popular activity at the high school, with some of these classes even competing interscholastically with other teams in Ohio, including the Canton YWCA girls teams in 1907 and a full schedule in 1912, which included 2 games with Salem, 2 with Alliance, 2 with Youngstown, and 1 with Barberton. Participation in sports declined, particularly basketball, at the high school level with the addition of physical education classes or gym classes in the late 1910s, and with the building of the MASSILLON Athletic Club, which was used as the high school gym because it was right across the street from the North Street School at the time. The first documented girls' physical education class was 1917, where the girls participated in various sports to stay active, like volleyball, basketball, folk dancing, and calisthenics, which, if you don't know, is a form of strength building exercises that requires no equipment, so just kind of going up there, kind of like doing Tai Bo, which I remember doing in 9th grade gym class here. So again, these are going to be, this is for the girls 1911 basketball, 1912. Here's the schedule from the 1912 girls. More class basketball pictures. More class basketball pictures. These all came from the MASSILLON yearbook, so this is a lot of the research that I did. And so seeing all of these girls participating every year kind of makes me smile because the boys had one team. This is the first girls' gym class that we have documented. So they did more than just athletic activities. They did a lot of social activities. Girls' gym class was very social. So this is during the summer of 1917, and this was called the Party Gym. They also had other athletic activities as well with the inclusion of gym classes. These included a ring and tumbling club and the Girls Athletic Association. There was also the continuation of class basketball teams at both junior high schools and Washington High School, though the game was cut to a half-court version instead of a full court. Some of these teams were very good, and they usually held tournaments against each other. This is the ring and tumbling club here. So, and this is my favorite example. This is the 1946-1947 Amazons team from Longfellow Junior High. And they were the city champions that year. Cheerleading, my favorite sport, and yes, it is a sport, was especially popular, and although it began as a men's-only activity, by 1935, women were joining the squad, with Jean McLean as the first female cheerleader documented in the high school yearbooks. The 1938 football season was especially extra, with the introduction of MASSILLON Tiger Swing Band and the Obi Tiger Skin mascot, which, if you invite me back here again, I can tell you all about why the 1930s football team was fantastic in MASSILLON because of some guy named Paul Brown. I don't know. So the cheerleading squad consisted of, on the left here, Peg Bussey, who is standing on top of Roger McIntosh's shoulder, and then Alvin Engelhardt and Ardella Loop are next to him. They have a lot of fun at football games, especially with the inclusion of the MASSILLON Tiger Swing Band. They were one of the first most entertaining high school halftime show bands. They introduced swing to the Sousa style. I think you like that, Mr. Krause, Sousa style. So they were active at all football games, leading the fans in cheers and rallies for the Tigers. So on the right, you see Peg Bussey on the back of Obi on the sidelines of one of the early football games. It's not that cold yet. The guys aren't wearing they're not in their cold weather gear quite yet. All right, so MASSILLON High School has a thing called the Wall of Champions, and every year there are different athletes from over time who are elected to this Wall of Champions. There are only 2 women on this wall, one of which is Eva SHORB WEISKOPF. Eva SHORB was born in MASSILLON in February of 1918. She grew up watching her father play golf, and at the age of 14 decided to try it herself. Eva became an accomplished golfer at Washington High School and was the first woman to letter in a varsity sport in 1935, playing on the boys' team. She competed in a variety of Stark County amateur golf tournaments where she won the Akron Women's District title and the Stark County Women's Championship twice. She attended the College of Worcester, where she competed on the men's golf team in 1938 for one season, until the administration decided that it was not acceptable for women to participating in golf or any kind of activity because it was inappropriate. She continued to play golf for over 60 years and was inducted into the Worcester College Hall of Fame in 1995, the Stark County Amateur Golf Hall of Fame in 2011, and the MASSILLON Wall of Champions in 2018. College of Worcester every year still holds an annual Eva SHORB WEISKOPF golfing tournament with colleges from all over the state of Ohio. So pictured on the right side is the 2018 golf team with several members of Eva's family. Eva's son Tom was also an accomplished golfer. Tom WEISKOPF, if anybody knows golf, he was a pretty big name professional golfer. Another fun fact, she also went to Mount Union after Worcester kicked her off the men's golf team. Mount Union is also my alma mater, so I have to plug that too. The other woman on the wall is Kelly BODIFORD Banks. Kelly A. BODIFORD Banks is a Washington High School graduate of the class of 1988. She lettered in both basketball and track and threw shot put and discus for the MASSILLON from 1984 to 1988, placing third overall at the state track meet her freshman year in 1985. She was the Ohio State champion for the girls shot put her junior year in 1987. That's her holding her award in the center. She was voted All-American in discus and threw shot put and discus at the University of Virginia. She was the first woman inducted into the MASSILLON Wall of Champions in 1996. The Kelly A. BODIFORD Bank Scholarship through the Mount Calvary Baptist Church was founded in 1995 to assist students with financial need based on academics and athletic ability. Kelly remains active with Washington High School Alumni Association, so I loved that I was able to plug both of these amazing, strong women. Eva, if she was still alive, would probably still be active with MASSILLON, and Kelly tries to remain and is active with the Alumni Association. Inclusion of sports after Title IX. This is probably one of my favorite things to talk about. After the passing of Title IX Sex Discrimination Civil Rights Law in 1972, the Ohio High School Athletic Association reevaluated all high school sports programs, including the girls' interscholastic activities, which from about 1920 to 1972, women were not allowed to participate in any interscholastic activities, so then they could not travel to Salem to play a girls' basketball team. For the first time in about 50 years, women were eligible to participate in all competitive athletic programs. Soon after Title IX's passage, the first official girls' athletic teams emerged, and by 1981, you had synchronized and competitive swimming, which the first teams were 1972. Basketball came back in 1974, volleyball in 1974, tennis 1974, track in 1975, gymnastics 1975, and fast-pitch softball by 1980. Nearly 20 years later, soccer would emerge as the newest sport in MASSILLON for both boys and girls. And in 2016, the first official girls golf program was established at MASSILLON. Yes, 2016. Okay. So Title IX states that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So, true or false? This is an interactive activity tonight. The United States Constitution guarantees equal rights for men and women.
No.
That is correct. If you said true, you're not alone though. 80% of Americans believe the Constitution guarantees equal rights on the basis of gender. It sounds true because it should be. My opinion. Lots of opinions. So at the same time that the United States was passing gender equity legislation, other countries around the globe were passing their own. The UK passed the Equal Pay Act in 1970, excuse me. Canada formed the Royal Commission on the Status of Women in 1967. Australia introduced legislation on the legislation to award women equal pay for equal work in 1969 and ban discrimination on the basis of sex in 1984. And the UN adopted the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or CEDAW, in 1979. While Title IX provided legal parameters for women in the U.S. to have increased access to in the athletic realm, it did not resolve the presence of discrimination. Sorry, I lost my place here for a second. So, the Equal Rights Amendment in the United States was introduced as several different names starting in 1923, like the Alice Paul Amendment. And it passed in both the House and the Senate in 1972, but it is still awaiting congressional ratification. The ERA would guarantee equal rights for all American citizens regardless of sex and would end the legal distinctions between men and women in terms of divorce, property, employment, and other matters. January 27, 2020, Virginia became the 38th and final state needed to ratify the amendment, but work is still being done to eliminate the original deadline, which was 1982, was the original deadline to ratify the amendment in order for the amendment to become a law. So just a couple quotes from some popular women here. The ERA isn't about who we're against, it's an affirmative statement about who we're for everybody. This is about making our United States of America a more inclusive country, one where you're protected because of who you are, not despite it. And that's by Danica Rome and Kate Kelly, Esquire, both from Virginia. Alice Paul said, "I never doubted the equal rights was the right direction. Most reforms, most problems are complicated, but to me, there's nothing complicated about ordinary equality." And Shirley Chisholm said, the fact that a woman who aspires to be a chairman of the board or a member of the House does so for exactly the same reasons as any man. Basically, that she thinks that she can do the job and she wants to try. The American Civil Rights Act of 1964, which says no person shall on the grounds of race, color, or national origin be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity, further paved the way for more American citizens to gain priority in sports, but athletes all over the world felt their vibrations. Roberta Bobby Gibb, on the left here, was the first woman to unofficially run and finish the Boston Marathon in 1966, and a year later, Kathrine Schweitzer competed as an official runner, but not without discrimination and violence from her male runners. So this is probably the most famous photo of Kathrine Schweitzer. She's trying to get run off the course by a Boston Marathon official, and other men tried to rip her number off of her chest and her back during the race. Billie Jean King is a former world's #1 tennis player with 39 Grand Slam titles and a record 20 wins at Wimbledon. She is the founder of both the Women's Tennis Association and the Women's Sports Foundation, an advocate for gender equality and social justice, and is most famously known for defeating Bobby Riggs at the Battle of the Sexes in 1973. Jackie Joyner-Kersee is ranked as one of the all-time greatest track and field athletes in the heptathlon and long jump, and is an active philanthropist in children's education, racial equality, and women's rights. The last two pictures are actually part of the MASSILLON Museum collection. And then we've got Korean-born Lydia Ko, is a top-ranked golfer based in New Zealand, and she was the youngest golfer of any gender, and she beat out Tiger Woods, to be ranked #1 in the world in 2015 at the age of 17. If I could golf like that at 17, if I could golf at any age, really. I talk really fast, so I apologize. But does anybody have any questions for me? Wow. Talked your ears off and just silence. Yes?
Do you happen to know when women started competing in the Olympics?
1900, there were 5 events that women could compete in. The first Olympics were 18, well, it wasn't 86, I think it was 1894. But women were excluded from the first Olympics, but they were able to compete in a couple events in 1900. I think there was like some gymnastics. It was really simple sports in 1900.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bailey, do you know, in the early women's basketball basketball teams? Was it a six-person team like it was until the 70s?
Yes, the girls were playing by the boys' rules, and then they kind of made up their own rules, and then there was actually a sport called captain ball, which is in the yearbooks. I believe it was 1916 or 1917, but this was kind of a version of basketball, where you had 10 players on the court. And also kind of similar to Ultimate Frisbee, where you couldn't move anywhere if you had the ball, and then if you had the ball, you had to get it back to your captain to score points. And so you could pass it back and forth, down and back and forth on the court, but you weren't technically scoring hoops. You just had to get the ball back to your captain, who was one designated person. So, but that's the only deviation from basketball. And then the half-court teams in the 40s and 50s for the inter-class basketballs. No?
Can you tell us a little bit about Massillon Museum?
Yes, so Massillon Museum was founded in 1933. It originally was part of the Massillon Public Library. We moved to our current building at 121 Lincoln Way East in 1996 with several renovations to a 1930s building, which was originally a dry goods market. Then in the early 2010s, we had renovation to our collection storage, and then in 2014, we entered into a contract with the Massillon Tiger Football Booster Club to house their collections and be the keepers of the collection that they've been housing for nearly 30 or 40 years at that point. And then in 2017, we were able to renew and exceed our every 5-year tax levy with the city for funding, which is a lot of where our funding comes from. And we were able to have a capital campaign to expand our building even further to include the new Paul Brown Museum, which opened in 2018. Massillon Museum is an art and history museum, so our mission and our statement is where art and history come together. We have over 100,000 objects in our permanent collections, and our capital campaign project expanded our building by about 80,000 square feet. We've got brand new gallery spaces up on our second floor, which include artifacts from our permanent collection, our fine and decorative art and photography collections, and one of the funnest exhibits is the Immel Circus, which was a local dentist who came back from World War II, decided he needed a hobby, was obsessed with the circus, and carved a 2,000-piece miniature circus by hand using his dental tools. So that is always on display, so that's always fun to have kids come up and see the circus. We also have 2 rotating dedicated art gallery spaces, Studio M and the Fred F. Silk Community Foundation Room. The foundation room can be used in collaboration with the community. So right now we have our Canton Artists League exhibition down in our silk room. Studio M features artists who actually have to apply about 3 years in advance for a space to display their pieces. Right now we have Rebecca Cross, who is a silk, she works with silk, and her exhibit is phenomenal. Saturday we are opening an exhibition on Anthony Aterovich artwork. He's a Cleveland artist, passed away in I believe 2010. So we have a gigantic exhibit full of his artwork going on display starting Saturday. We do lots of different classes and events. We have an awesome ceramic studio where if you have any kind of pottery or ceramics experience, you are welcome to sign up for our Wednesday or Saturday classes, or not classes, open studio. We're soon going to be offering classes again in our pottery studio, which we're really excited about. We had to put those on hold because of the pandemic. We also are going to be having a photography studio and a dark room. Hopefully within the next couple years. What else? We've got lots of stuff going on. If you like football, come talk to me because that's what I do at the museum. I didn't realize I was going to be a sports historian when I started at the museum, but here I am. If you'd asked me 10 years ago if I was going to be a professional on Paul Brown and the Cleveland Browns, I would have laughed in your face. So, yes.
Can you give us a little bit of history about Paul Brown, what his influence in football was? Or?
How much time do you have?
Well, short story.
So Paul Brown was born, I'll try to be very quick on this. Paul Brown was born in Norwalk, Ohio in 1908. His father worked for the railroad and was moved to Brewster just outside of Massillon in 1917. That's how Paul Brown came to Massillon. He was obsessed with football from a young age. The first football he had at the age of 5, when the bladder blew out of that, he stuffed it with leaves and continued to play with the neighborhood kids. He was a very small guy, probably only about 5'8", 5'9", 150 pounds, top, soaking wet. In high school, he probably didn't reach 125, but he still wanted to play football. So in the 20s at the time, there would be a summer camp, and the coaches would come and pick the players up for the summer camp, drive them out to the lake, and they would have practice. Well, Paul Brown sat on the doorstep of his parents' house waiting for the coaches to come pick him up, and nobody came. Well, for 3 days, so it says, he didn't eat, he was depressed, his mother was sick of it, so his father drove him out to the lake, told the coach, you put him in whatever position or whatever he needs to do, he's on the team, just get him out of my house. So Paul Brown made the football team. He was the 4th string quarterback his sophomore year, and they were playing a game in which they were up by about 70 points, and Coach Stewart decided to put him in. His first play, he threw a touchdown into the end zone. He was starting quarterback his junior and senior year at Massillon. Went to the Ohio State University for a year. Coach told him he was too small and kicked him off the football field. Then that's when Paul Brown decided that he didn't really like Ohio State anyway, and went to the University of Miami in Ohio, where he was the quarterback for Miami-Oxford his junior and senior year. Had a couple years after graduation as a teacher and coach in Severn Prep in Maryland at a prep school, where he went out there to be a teacher, and they asked him to be the assistant athletic coach, and he said, sure, I like football, I played basketball, ran track, I'll do whatever you want me to do, I'm 21 years old. Well, the athletic director and head football coach got ill, and Paul Brown was shoved into the head coach position for football. Took that school to their first ever state championship in 1931. 1932, Massillon's looking for a new coach. They remembered Paul Brown. They invited him back. And from 1932 to 1940, Paul Brown won 80 games and lost 2. Those 2 games being to Canton McKinley in 1932 and 1933, which almost ended his football coaching career because Massillon didn't want him back in 1934, because you can't beat McKinley, then are you a coach at all? Fortunately for Paul Brown, he remained coach for the Massillon Tigers. By 1935, he won a state championship and the national championship. Did that again in 1936. 1937 was snuffed from the national championship. I believe it was Toledo Weight. 1938, 39, and 40 state and national championships. His 1940 team only gave up 6 points that entire season, and that was to Canton McKinley. But that team is also considered the best high school football team ever. Paul Brown is quoted as saying that they could have probably beat his first year Ohio State University team when he moved there in 1941. Paul Brown in 1941 was hired at Ohio State to be their head coach. 1942 led Ohio State to their very first national championship. 1943 lost all of his players due to the war and ROTC regulations, and coached the Baby Bucks to a 2-9 record. Was drafted into the Navy in 1944, where he went to Great Lakes Naval Academy for 2 years in 44 and 45. His best game being beating Notre Dame in 1945 as the head coach of Great Lakes. 1945-46, he's approached by this guy named Mickey McBride, who's trying to start a new franchise in Cleveland for football. Mickey has heard of Paul Brown and was like, well, I think you should be our pro coach here in Cleveland. What do you say? Paul Brown, expecting arms wide open welcome back at Ohio State. The athletic director of Ohio State said, you can come back if you want to. So Paul Brown said, I'm going to go to Cleveland. So Paul Brown gets to Cleveland. They hold a survey in the Cleveland Plain Dealer to name this new franchise. Well, it's Paul Brown's team, so they should be the Browns, and so then we have the Browns. Paul Brown stayed in Cleveland from 1946 to 1963. where in the first 10 years of coaching the Browns from 46 to 55, went to the championship game 9 times in 10 years, won 6 times? 6 times? No. 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 54, 55, 8 times. I think I got that right. It was in the All-American Football Conference from 46 to 49, this new franchise, which was considered the amateur franchise according to the NFL coaches and owners. When the Browns joined the NFL in 1950, they beat the NFL reigning champions Philadelphia Eagles. Of course, the coach of the Philadelphia Eagles said, well, you passed the ball the entire time, so of course you're going to win. Well, in the second meeting of Cleveland Browns and Philadelphia Eagles, Paul Brown did not throw a single pass, and they still won. They ended up winning the NFL championship their first year in the NFL, proving to everybody that just because we were in the AAFC for 4 years does not mean we're not a team to challenge. 1961 is when Art Modell took hold of the Cleveland Browns ownership, and that's kind of when everything hit the fan. Paul Brown and Art Modell hated each other. I did a whole program on this before, so I could talk to you for 40 more minutes about Paul Brown and Art Modell, so I'm just going to skip to the good part where Paul Brown and Art Modell got to a point where Art Modell said, no, you're done. You're fired from coach. You can still be president of the organization, but your general manager and coaching position is gone. Paul Brown left Cleveland, went back and forth for about 5 years with his wife Katie to La Jolla, California. 1965, he's approached again to try to start a new expansion franchise in the AFC, American Football Conference, and they're looking at Columbus, Indianapolis, maybe Cincinnati. So Paul Brown kind of jumps on that because he wants to get back into coaching. He's still young. He's 60 years old. He's young. He still wants to coach. So starts to try to get everything set with that, try to get the expansion franchise for Cincinnati. They're able to purchase property to build Riverside Stadium, and in 1967, Cincinnati is given the rights to a new franchise for the Cincinnati Bengals. 1968 is their first season. Between 68 and 75, Paul Brown was the head coach and majority owner of the team. He didn't have a great record for Cincinnati, but the legacy he started there led them to a Super Bowl within 5 years. He was an innovator on and off the field. He's quoted as saying he's first and foremost an educator, so he brought his teaching abilities to the football team. He would drag a chalkboard into his locker room, hand out a little notebook to all of his players, and draw all the plays on the chalkboard. He told his players, all right, now you got to write every single play down. You got to write everything down in this little notebook that I gave you, and then study it. Once you study it, you're going to take a test on it. Once you pass that test, we're going to go out on the field and we're going to practice those plays. So these kids knew each play, inside, outside, backwards, forwards. Any way they could run it, they ran it, and that's how he wanted his teams. He also was a very sore loser. He did not like to lose at all. I've heard stories of he kind of took one of his student athlete managers kind of under his wing in 38 and 39, and he took this player to the tennis courts. Well, Paul Brown beat his butt, and so the player, John David, he decided to get better at tennis. Well, he approached Coach Brown one day and said, hey, I want to go play tennis next week. Yeah, go ahead. So Paul Brown picks him up, drives him out to the tennis courts, and John returns the favor and just completely destroys Paul Brown in tennis. Paul Brown throws his tennis racket on the ground, gets in the car, drives off. John has to walk home. But Paul Brown, everything that he did from the playbook to filming his players on the field, to the permanent face mask on the helmets, it was everything to make his players stronger, better, quicker, and everything that he could do to win. I guess that was the quickest way I could talk about Paul Brown. I mean, I could keep you here for another 2 or 3 hours, but... Anybody else? All right.
Well, thank you, Bailey.
Thank you very much.
Just a reminder, if you haven't paid your membership, and check your Bugle newsletter for when you're due. That'll save BJ having to send you a reminder card. And also, this Thursday evening, the Wall Street Journal will be publishing an article online about the Underground Railroad houses in Salem. And it will be in the Friday print version of the Wall Street Journal. So if you want to look for that, it should be a wonderful article. They were here for 2 days, and they worked with a lot of the museum staff over the last 3 weeks to collect information and interview homeowners and take photos. So we're looking forward to that. Please feel free to join us for some refreshments and social time, and you can talk to Bailey afterwards as well. And join us next month for our regular monthly meeting on the second Tuesday at 7. Thanks.